Hello and welcome to my channel. Teresa here. So I wanted to show you just some different ways that we can make some jelly prints with layers, stencils, stamps, pearl powders, and something I learned from Eddie. I'll link his channel below where he calls cracking the edges. So I'll show you how I take away from that. Supplies, we're going to be using some paints, gel press. I'm going to be using the 8x10. I'm also using some metallic and some opaque paints, some shimmer paints, but you could either use mica powders or pearl powders. And then we're going to be using stamps and stencils, and I'm just going to be showing you how I layer up to create really dynamic, interesting looking prints. So if you're new to jelly plate printing, it's kind of hard sometimes to know where to start. So where I'm going to start with this first print, I'm going to be making this print in 4 layers. So I'm starting with the darker color. I'm going to use a brown for this one. It's just a burnt sienna. And I'm just going to brayer the entire surface with the burnt sienna, just giving it an even coat of paint. And then while the paint is still wet, this is when you want to start pulling away the texture or the design. So this initial print, this initial paint layer isn't going to be really showing that much in the end. It's just going to show texture. So I'm using a few different things to get my texture. I'm using these really large bubble wrap pieces, and some of the bubbles are popped, so you can see there's like holes. So I'm taking just some Spanish moss and my small brayer, my 2-inch brayer, just kind of pressing that in. I'm not concerned with what design I'm getting from this very first layer of paint. I'm mostly working on removing the paint. So again, it doesn't matter to me if you can tell what it is that created the texture, because I just want to remove a lot of the paint. And then when I put my layers over the top of it, the layers will have a little more interest because they'll have this kind of first layer to create the different textures. I've got this number. This is from Carrie's channel, and I'll link his channel below. He actually makes this stencil for PM Artist Studio, and I just love these little number texts that he created. So again, not too concerned if the numbers show for me. I'm using it to kind of reveal the plate. That's my goal with this first layer, is removing the paint. So when you use your brayer over drying paint, it actually removes the paint. So that's a kind of fun way to get some of that paint off of the plate. And it leaves a little bit of the design behind in the meantime. Then I have this shelf liner. It's just kind of squishy, foamy shelf liner, and I'm just going to use that to pick up a little bit more of those solid pieces of paint. Now I'm going to put my stencil down. I'm using the Suspicious Sprouts. This is Rhonda's design, again at PM Artist Studio. And just pressing that into the areas of the gel plate that are now revealed from that first layer. Now I'm going to go in with some of my blue mica powder. You could use pearl powders, you could use anything that's kind of powdery that you could get to stick to those open spaces remaining on where you can actually see the gel plate. Comment below to let me know what you like to see in a jelly print session, and don't forget to like this video. Also, if you're new to my channel and you haven't subscribed and you're enjoying what you're seeing, don't forget to subscribe. So back to these pearl powder, mica powders. I am only going to put some of the pearl powders in just different areas, not over the entire background. I want to catch the eye on different places. Then I'm going to go in with my matte paints. So I'm just using a variety of colors. Instead of putting my paints directly onto my gel plate and stencil, I'm brayering them out on a scrap piece of paper. This way I don't get the blob of paint that you usually get when you kind of put the paint directly onto the gel plate. And so I'll just go in with each of the colors and kind of keeping to the colors that blend together, trying not to get any muddy colors. And I'm just gonna fill the entire background of the plate with these colors. The nice thing about doing it this way, where you're kind of pulling the paint from off on the side, is you don't have all that leftover blobby paint, and so you only put on just a little bit at a time, and if it feels like it needs more paint, you can go back and get a little bit more. So I just feel like this gives a little more control versus just putting the paint directly onto the plate. I'm a heavy paint pourer, so I tend to squeeze big blobs, and then sometimes I have a little bit of a mess going on the plate, so this is a nice way to avoid that. Of my colors on the left, the blue, the bright blue here, this is actually a metallic blue. All the rest of the paints are matte paints. Once I'm happy with where those colors are, then I'm going to pull away the stencil very carefully. Don't want to go too fast with these detail stencils so that you don't rip them. And now I have the gel plate revealed, so I've got what's behind those sprouts. And then now I'm going to take another stencil, also from PM Artist Studio. This is the Big Script stencil. And this one, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm taking different mica colors, and I'm going to just put the mica colors in different areas, just kind of moving the eye around the plate, but not completely filling it in with the mica powders. Now I've got these foil flakes. I just got these at Dollar Tree. They're kind of a coppery color. And I'm just gonna pull out some of those flakes. They're kind of like little sheets, and I'm just breaking them up. And I'm applying those in the areas where the gel plate is revealed. So I just kind of burnish these onto the surface of the gel plate. Just a little warning with these, they don't stick perfectly. So when I put my paint over these little foil pieces, some of the foil pieces will kind of stick to my brayer. So, but I don't mind that, and most of the pieces do end up staying on the surface. So I like to add this kind of little touch of these foil flakes. They're very, very bright, even compared to the mica and pearl powders. They are very vivid on the surface. So I do like that most of them will stick, and I don't mind that a few of them will come up. And just remember, it may affect your brayering though if they do come up, just because they'll leave little spots behind anywhere that it's stuck on the brayer. So just keep that in mind. But I'm just going to use some khaki paint, almost like an off-white color, just to go over the entire surface while I still have my stencil down, pressing into the areas so that I can really get in between those words and the letters so that I can really get a good impression. This is not going to be my final layer, so now I'm going to very carefully pull away the stencil. This stencil will break very easily, so it's good to go slow and pull it up evenly as you go. I managed to not break any pieces of this one on this print session. I've broken a piece in the past, but I was able to glue it back with some E6000 glue. So now that my paint layer has dried, and for every single one of these layers that I'm doing, if it involves paint, I am letting the paint dry completely before I do the next layer. So I'm using this metallic purple paint and a metallic dark blue, almost like a metallic navy. I'm going to put that behind the entire print. Now I need to have enough paint to be able to make the entire surface wet, because I'm going to pull the entire print, all of those layers, with this coat of paint. So I can already tell that there wasn't enough paint on the plate to be able to do that. So while it's still wet, I'm just putting down another little bit more of each color onto the plate. And then I'm going to just make sure it's touching the corners, and I'm making an ombre in the middle with the two colors. And once I feel like I have nice even coverage, I'm going to put this is just copy paper that I'm using. It's a nice copy paper. It's a bright white copy paper, but it's a lot thinner than using the cardstock that I typically use. These are nice because if I want to make these into envelopes, these make really great envelopes. They're not too thick, not too thin, and these larger gel prints make great envelopes. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure all of my edges are cracked. So again, I learned this from Eddie Makes Art. He had said in his videos to make sure once your print is completely dry, and I use a little fan to dry mine, and walk away for about 15 minutes so that I make sure all of the layers are completely dry. And then I crack all the edges, and the important thing about doing that is it helps to make sure all of the paint pulls up and you don't get any of these kind of white spaces. It really does help. And there you can see all of the layers have come up into this one final print. And because of the different areas of the shimmer from the pearl powders and the background with the glimmer paints, it's very, very shiny, but also there are areas of matte color. So it kind of helps to even out like the coloring, and it makes it like it feels like a art piece to me. And you can see those foil pieces stand out really well. They really catch the light, and you have the variation of the sprouts showing through. You see the letters showing through to the very background, and then just all of the colors mixed. So at the very, very front is where my brown is, and you can almost see the brown. It's a very light color of brown, so it's not very prominent, but it does help give that texture to that first layer or two. So now we're moving on to our second print. This one's going to have 4 layers also. So I'm starting with a really deep purple. This is the dioxazine, I think is how you say it, purple. And I'm going to brayer, same thing like I did with the brown, but I'm going to brayer it all in purple for my first layer. And then I'm going to work to remove the paint to create my texture. So this time I'm using another PM Artist Studio stencil. This is the Chaotic Mesh, and behind the Chaotic Mesh I'm going to go in with some small bubble wrap. Then I'm going to reveal the plate. There's still too much paint left on, so I'm going to use the numbers again and keep removing paint off of the plate. Then I have that shelf liner again. I'm going to use that to remove just a little bit more of the paint. So for this second layer, I am going to apply the paint directly onto the surface. It's the same colors that I used in the first print, but this time I'm just going to brayer them out directly onto the plate. I do like to start with my lightest color first, so my yellow up at the top, I'm going to blend that one out first. I wanted it to blend just a little more, so I just flipped my brayer over and I can blend those two colors together nicely. Same thing with the pink. I can flip it and get it to blend a little bit better. You can see in the background where those paint blobs started, it kind of leaves behind a little bit of that blob in the background, and that's why when I had first done it off of the plate, I wanted to avoid that. But on this particular one, you'll see I'll be removing some of this paint. I wasn't as concerned about that. Now I'm laying down, these are like the leftover pieces from the suspicious sprouts, and I'm just laying them on my plate. And now I'm going to create my third print just by putting a piece of copy paper and rubbing all of that open area onto my paper. That way I'm going to reveal the gel plate, and then I can add some more layers. So this is kind of just like a side print, just a happy extra print that you get from doing all these layers. Sometimes these turn out great and sometimes they're not that great, but I think this one turned out pretty nice. It's got all those vibrant colors. That'll make a great background for something. So you can see there's still texture left on the plate, but there's also the plate is revealed. So for this one, I'm gonna go and do kind of an ombre from gold down to like an orange to purple. I'm just gonna start with the gold at the top, blend in the light gold, the darker orange color, and then end with the purple. Now that I've got all the mica powder down, I'm going to pull up each one of those strips, and that paint that was on the background is going to still be revealed and a little bit wet underneath these strips. So I am going to let those strips dry completely. Then I'm going to take this Titan Buff white golden paint with my turquoise paint just to lighten it up. And I mix those out on my spare piece of paper here, and then I'm just going to brayer that to cover the entire surface. Again, I'm going to be pulling the print with this color, so I want to make sure it's wet enough to adhere to the paper, but not too wet that it's going to slide. Tricky part for me is always making sure my corners are covered in paint. Those are the parts that tend to not want to pull up, so I am trying to be careful to make sure I add enough paint to my corners. Now I'm going to put my piece of paper down. I am using my Gelli plate placement tool that I had created. I made this with a Dollar Tree art easel, and I'll put a link to that video how I made that if you're interested to make one for yourself. So you can see this corner didn't come up entirely. Now, again, I did let this print dry for about 15 minutes before I pulled it. There you can see all the layers showing through. That purple is a lot more prominent on this one than the brown was on the first one. And it just creates so much texture and dimension into the layers. So you can see the sprouts, they shine through. Then you can even see the numbers on this one in the different areas. And of course the chaotic mesh shows through. So this is a really fun print with a lot of colors and layers, and it just gives a lot of interest. So for this next print, we're going to do a really easy one. This one's only going to be 2 layers. The first layer is going to be yellow and gold. I've got yellow up at the top, gold at the bottom, and I'm just going to brayer those out and blend them together. Once I'm happy with that brayering, I'm just going to pull that entire print onto a piece of copy paper. This is going to be my base color, and then that way I can pull on top of this, pull another layer on top of this. So this is another way that you can get layers. You can pull each layer one at a time onto your print, or you can do like I was doing my first 2, and you can layer them up on the plate and let them dry each time. So here you can see the little bit of gold and then the matte paint. And I'm just going to set that aside and work on the next layer. I'm using 3 of my colors. The top color is the blue metallic. And if you remember, I used the gold on the bottom of the plate. So this time the metallic will be at the top of the plate. I've got pink and purple, and I'm just going to blend those colors all together. And now I have a nice coat of paint, not too thick, but also you don't want this part to be too thin. If it's too thin, it's going to dry too quickly to get the design we're trying to do for this one. I'm using a cake scraper that I got from Dollar Tree. It's just a kind of flimsy plastic. It's got 2 tooth sizes, the smaller one that I'm using right now, and then the other side is a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to make a random design on my jelly plate, just kind of moving it around. I'm not really concerned with the design. I'm just going with what looks good. I do think it looks cool going over the lines. It looks a little more 3D that way. So I'm just going to go back in, kind of go over some of the lines I already created, and just kind of make it look interesting. If the paint is getting to be too blobby on the scraper, you can scrape that off in between. So I'm taking the yellow page that I had just created, and I'm putting the gold at the bottom just the way that I had pulled it. And then I'm just going to press that in while that paint was still wet. So I did not let that layer dry until I put the yellow down, and then I let it dry completely. And there you have a really interesting, very simple print that you can use with just a scraper tool. You can use the one from Gelli Arts or the one from Dollar Tree or any other supply that you might have to make those lines. I think it just makes a really cool looking piece here. So that one's pretty simple. Now for our 5th one, we're going to do something a little bit different. This one, it's going to be using our foam stamp. So I'm just brayering out on one corner of the gel plate my yellow and my coral color. Then I have this Bumble Bee foam stamp. Again, this is from PM Artist Studio. I'm revealing the plate from this stamp and then taking the ink or the paint that I had removed and putting it onto another piece of the plate that doesn't have any paint. I'm just going to keep doing that until I'm happy with the design. If you want to remove some of the paint, you could use a brayer just like I did here, and that's just making a little bit more of a straighter line up at this kind of separation point. So you just brayer over that drying paint and it will pull up that paint and remove it. I'm going to use powder again. This is going to be over the kind of revealed places where I had put the stamp, and it's going to just create a nice little shimmer behind the matte paint in this area. So I'll just add this is the blue color again. It looks like a little bit of gold in between when I was using this color and a gold color. They just kind of make a green color, but it's really, really pretty because it goes nicely with this background. Once I have this bottom part blended out, I'm going to use my cloth. It's just a microfiber cloth, and just blend it over the leftover gel area, just so that more of that mica powder gets onto the gel plate. So this is the bottom half. Now I'm ready to work on the top half. Because these have the Bumble Bee stamps and it's a little bit of the opposite, I'm just going to put blue where the wings are. Having a small detail brush like this one, it's just a round makeup brush, really helps to stay within the lines of where you're working. Then I will add a little bit of the gold perfect pearls to the bee bodies. There were some extra paint pieces on the gel plate that I wanted to remove, so I am using, now that the paint is dry, I'm using a baby wipe just to remove any extra little pieces of paint that I don't want on the plate before I pull my print. I'm going in with 3 colors. These are all matte colors. And same thing, I'm just going to brayer those, blend them, and make a nice smooth layer. This will be my final layer and my final print for this session. So this layer is going to pull all of those layers. Crack my edges once more after my print has dried. And now you have a two-tone print. So you've got the bottom half that has this really nice kind of outline bumblebee with a little bit of the shimmer inside of the stamping, just to catch the light. And then on the top half, looks like a bumblebee flying away, and it's nice and shimmery where the wings and the body of the bumblebee are against the matte background. So there's a little bit of close-up to how this looks against the background. I think this is a really eye-catching print. It turned out really cool, and the bottom part with that one bee that has the green and gold, kind of the blue to green coloring, that one is the prettiest one to me on this print. I think it really stands out and looks so cool, looks almost three-dimensional. So those are all of the prints that I created. I hope that this gives you some inspiration on ways to use layers, different ways to use those perfect pearl powders, or if you like using the pan pastels or chalk, you could use those in replacement for the mica powders if maybe the shimmery part isn't your thing, but you can still get some really cool techniques from just mixing your mediums and creating just some really fun prints. These again would make really great envelopes, the bigger size, but they would also make really great background pieces like this one. I could imagine putting that into maybe a junk journal, or even that would go really great as a trading card, artist trading card background, because it's got so much design and texture on just the print alone. And same for this last print here. This one has so much shininess where those sprouts are, but it also has the matte paint really kind of grounding it. So I think that these prints all turned out really cool. Definitely they all have their own style and personality. Even just the sprouts with the colors, they look really neat. So I think that this was a really fun print session for me. I do love layering up my stencils and colors just like this, and just seeing how building them up on the plate creates really cool designs on your jelly prints. So hope that inspired you, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for being here, and happy crafting.